A 4-year-old street urchin finds a millionaire hanging upside down by a motorcycle gang. But she saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Rate my story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The midday sun beat down on the cracked pavement of Harmony Creek, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, when Isabel, barely 4 years old, but with the frail look of a 2-year-old, hid behind the stone wall of the town square. Her large, frightened eyes observed a scene she would never forget. 3 burly bikers had tied a man by his feet and were hanging him upside down from the highest branch of the old maple tree. Richard Davenport, 30 years old and with the looks of a Hollywood heartthrob that contrasted sharply with his current situation, swayed like a human pendulum while the aggressors laughed at his humiliation. His expensive linen suit was torn, his dark, well-cut hair hung disheveled, and blood began to rush to his face due to the inverted position. "Next time, think twice before sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," growled the largest of the bikers, a man with a thick beard and arms covered in tattoos. "Your partner doesn't like overly curious people." Isabel clutched her raggedy Ann doll to her chest, her only companion since losing her parents in an accident months ago. The girl lived on the streets of Harmony Creek, sleeping in alleyways and surviving on the charity of others. But her memory was extraordinary. Every face, every voice, every detail was etched in her mind like a photograph. The bikers mounted their machines and sped away in a cloud of dust and deafening noise, leaving Richard hanging and groaning in pain. The town square returned to the typical lunchtime silence when everyone retreated to their homes to escape the scorching heat. For a long moment, Isabel remained motionless behind the wall. Her life experience on the streets had taught her that interfering in adults' problems often brought dangerous consequences. But something in the suffering of that well-dressed man struck a sensitive chord in her small, wounded heart. She looked around to make sure she was alone, then ran to the tree with the silent steps of someone who had learned to move unnoticed. Richard had lost consciousness, his face purple from the accumulation of blood. Isabel examined the rope that held him to the branch. It was thick and well tied, impossible to untie with her little hands. She searched the ground until she found a sharp stone and began to saw at the rope with surprising determination for someone so young. Her thin arms trembled with the effort, but she did not give up. Sweat streamed down her dirty face as she worked under the relentless sun. When the rope finally broke, Richard crashed to the hard-packed dirt with a dull thud. Isabel ran to him, shaking him gently by the shoulders. The man opened his eyes slowly, still dizzy and confused. "Thank you, little one," he murmured in a hoarse voice, trying to sit up. "You saved me." Isabel did not respond. She had learned that talking too much on the streets could be dangerous. She only helped him to his feet, supporting him with her limited strength as he regained his balance. Richard observed the frail girl in front of him. Tangled brown hair, dirty and mended clothes, but bright eyes with a rare intelligence. "Where are your parents?" he asked, wiping the blood that trickled from a cut on his forehead. Isabel lowered her head and did not answer. Richard understood immediately. He knew well the look of someone who was alone in the world. He himself had grown up in foster care, bouncing from home to home until he turned 18 and managed to build his financial empire alone through shrewd investments on Wall Street. "What's your name?" he insisted gently. "Isabel," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Richard squatted down to be at the girl's level, ignoring the pain he felt throughout his body. There was something in that child that awakened in him a protective instinct that he did not even know he possessed. Perhaps it was the recognition of a suffering similar to his own, or simply gratitude for her courage in helping him when everyone else had hidden. "Isabel, do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" She shook her head negatively, her big eyes filled with a sadness that should not exist in someone so young. Richard made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "How about coming home with me? I'm sure my wife would be happy to meet you." In fact, he was not sure at all about Charlotte's reaction, but something inside him insisted that he could not abandon that girl on the streets after she had risked her own safety to save him. Isabel hesitated, studying his face with her perceptive eyes. There was genuine kindness there, something she rarely found. She nodded timidly and took Richard's outstretched hand. As they walked through the dusty streets towards the Davenport mansion, neither of them suspected that the bikers had been only the first move in a much more dangerous game, and that both their lives were about to become complicated in unimaginable ways. The Davenport mansion stood majestically on the top of the hill overlooking Harmony Creek, its white walls contrasting with the green gardens that surrounded the property. Isabel squeezed Richard's hand more tightly as they approached the wrought iron gate, intimidated by the grandeur of the place that seemed to come out of a fairy tale. Richard had accumulated his fortune through accurate investments on Wall Street, starting with small amounts as a teenager and multiplying his capital until he became the wealthiest man in the region. His investments in stocks and real estate funds had yielded millions, some of which he kept in bitcoins as a store of value. The butler, a grey-haired man named Thomas, opened the front door with an expression of surprise to see his boss injured and accompanied by a ragamuffin. "Mr. Davenport, what happened? Should I call a doctor?" "Later, Thomas. First I need to speak with my wife." Richard paused, looking at Isabel. "And prepare a room for our new guest." "New guest, sir?" "Isabel will be staying with us for a while." They crossed the entrance hall, ornamented with marble and crystal chandeliers. Isabel had never seen such wealth gathered in one place. Her bare feet sank into the Persian rug as she watched with fascination the paintings on the walls and the polished furniture that gleamed under the golden light. Charlotte Davenport emerged from the main living room like an icy apparition. At 28 years old, she was a woman of calculated beauty, her blonde hair always impeccable and her clothes costing more than most people earned in a year. When her cold blue eyes landed on Isabel, her expression hardened immediately. "Richard, what child is this? And why are you in such a deplorable state?" "I had a small incident in town. This is Isabel. She helped me." Charlotte examined the girl from top to bottom with poorly disguised disdain. The dirty, ragged child clashed completely with the refined environment of the mansion, like a stain on a perfect painting. "I see. Very noble of her." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "But surely she has a family waiting for her at home." "Actually, she doesn't," Richard replied calmly. "Isabel is an orphan. I thought we could—" "We could what?" Charlotte interrupted, her voice rising an octave. "Richard, did you hit your head? We can't simply pick up abandoned children as if they were stray dogs." Isabel shrank behind Richard, feeling the hostility radiating from the blonde woman. Her photographic memory had already catalogued every micro-expression of Charlotte, every gesture of rejection, every word loaded with poison. "Charlotte, please. It's only temporary until we find a suitable solution." A suitable solution would be to take her to the county orphanage immediately. "I grew up in foster care," said Richard, his voice carrying a harshness that Isabel had never heard before. "I know exactly what they're like. I won't condemn an innocent child to that place." Charlotte realized that she had touched a sensitive point and changed her strategy, forcing a fake smile. "Of course, dear. You're right, as always. It's just that I was worried about your safety. Let me take care of those injuries while Thomas prepares a bath for Isabel." The housekeeper, Clementine Sousa, a robust woman of 55 with kind eyes and hands calloused from work, appeared discreetly at the door of the living room. She had worked for the Davenport family for more than a decade and knew well the moods of her employers. "Mrs. Davenport, may I take the girl to the bath and find some clothes?" "Yes, Clementine. And then we'll see what to do with her." Clementine extended her hand to Isabel with a warm smile that contrasted dramatically with Charlotte's coldness. The girl hesitated, looking at Richard for confirmation. He nodded encouragingly. "Go with Clementine, little one. She'll take good care of you." As she climbed the mahogany staircase following Clementine, Isabel heard fragments of the argument that began downstairs. Charlotte's voice sounded controlled but furious, while Richard maintained a patient tone that she recognized as forced. "Completely irresponsible. A stranger in our house. What if she's dangerous? Just a scared child. My moral duty. It costs nothing." The bathroom where Clementine took her was larger than any place where Isabel had ever slept. The white porcelain tub looked like a small lake, and the golden faucets shone like jewels. Clementine tested the water temperature with her elbow, a maternal technique that the girl watched with fascination. "There, my dear, the water is nice and warm, just the way children like it." Isabel had taken few real baths in her life, usually washing in public fountains or in the rain when possible. The sensation of the warm water enveloping her small, injured body was almost magical. Clementine helped her to lather up with products that smelled of wildflowers, removing layers of dirt and revealing a fair-skinned girl marked by small scratches and bruises, evidence of a hard life on the streets. "You are brave, you know that?" said Clementine as she washed Isabel's tangled hair. "Not just anyone would have the courage to help a stranger like you did." "He looked sad," murmured Isabel, her first complete sentence since arriving at the mansion. "Like I feel when I'm hungry." Clementine's heart clenched. The housekeeper had raised 4 children and recognized when a child carried deep wounds. There was something in the way Isabel spoke, in the premature maturity of her gestures, that indicated traumas beyond her age. After the bath, Clementine found some clothes that had belonged to a friend's daughter, a light blue dress that was too big for Isabel, but that transformed her completely. With her hair clean and combed, the girl revealed a delicate beauty that had been hidden under the dirt of the streets. When they went down for dinner, Charlotte barely managed to disguise her irritation at seeing Isabel presentable and clearly installed in the house. Richard, who had changed clothes and taken care of his injuries, smiled at the girl's transformation. "You look beautiful, Isabel." The girl blushed, not used to compliments or kindness. During dinner, she ate in silence, observing the dynamics between the couple. Her exceptional memory recorded every exchanged look, every unspoken word, every underlying tension. Charlotte only picked at her food, clearly disturbed by the presence of the intruder. Her carefully laid plans for the perfect life did not include an orphaned child messing up her elegant routine. "Tomorrow, I need to sort out some issues at the company," said Richard, cutting through the silence. "Charlotte, can you stay with Isabel?" "Of course," she replied with a forced smile. "It will be a pleasure." But in Charlotte's mind, dark plans were already beginning to form. That unwanted child would not remain in her perfect home for long, no matter the cost. The next morning, Richard left early to resolve matters at Davenport and Ferreira Construction, the company he shared with his partner Oscar. He left Isabel having breakfast in the kitchen with Clementine, who had prepared homemade sugar bread and warm milk with honey, luxuries that the girl had never experienced. As soon as the sound of Richard's car was lost in the distance, the atmosphere of the mansion changed drastically. Charlotte appeared in the kitchen with an expression that made Clementine stiffen instinctively. "Clementine, I need you to go to the market. The list is on the hall table." "But Mrs. Davenport, what about the girl? I'll take care of her." Charlotte's smile was as cold as ice. "After all, I need to get to know our guest better." Clementine hesitated, her maternal instinct warning her of danger, but she could not disobey a direct order. She cast a worried look at Isabel, who was chewing the sweet bread without suspecting anything. "I'll be right back," she whispered to the girl, gently squeezing her shoulder. After Clementine left, Charlotte approached Isabel with calculated steps. The girl raised her big, trusting eyes, still not understanding the change in the environment. "Isabel, dear, we need to talk." Charlotte pulled a chair and sat down at the table, her perfectly manicured nails drumming on the wooden surface. She wore a silk dress that cost more than $3,000, bought with money that Richard never questioned her spending. "You know you can't stay here forever, don't you?" Isabel stopped chewing, a strange feeling forming in her small stomach. "My husband is a very good man, but also very naive. He doesn't understand that children like you, well, children from the streets can be dangerous." "I'm not dangerous," murmured Isabel, her voice almost inaudible. "Of course not, dear." Charlotte's tone was sweet as poisoned honey. "But other people might think so. Imagine if the neighbors found out that Richard brought a stranger home. They could call the police, say you were kidnapped." Isabel's eyes widened with fear. In her life on the streets, she had learned to fear uniforms and authorities. "It would be terrible if you ended up in a place even worse than where you were before, wouldn't it?" Charlotte got up and walked to the window, pretending to contemplate the garden while discreetly observing the girl's reaction through the reflection in the glass. "There is a foster home 2 towns away from here, very far from Harmony Creek. If you caused any trouble here, if Richard started to get tired of you, well, that's where you would go." Isabel felt the tears burning her eyes, but forced herself not to cry. On the streets, she had learned that showing weakness only attracted more predators. "On the other hand," Charlotte continued, turning with a fake smile, "if you were a well-behaved girl who didn't cause trouble, who knew how to stay quietly in her room when the adults need to talk, well, maybe you could stay a little longer." "I'll be well-behaved," whispered Isabel. "Great! How about we start now? You go to your room and stay there until I call you. No noise, no bothering anyone. Can you do that for me?" Isabel nodded quickly and left the kitchen with hasty steps. Charlotte smiled to herself, satisfied with the first move of her strategy. She couldn't simply kick the girl out. Richard would never forgive her. But she could make her life so miserable that she herself would choose to leave. Meanwhile, in downtown Harmony Creek, Richard parked in front of the 3-story building that housed the offices of Davenport and Ferreira. His mind was still divided between the events of the previous day and a growing feeling that something was not right in his business. Oscar Ferreira was waiting for him in the meeting room, a 45-year-old man with a prominent belly and thinning hair that he tried to disguise with pomade. His small, shrewd eyes gleamed with a dangerous intelligence that Richard had recently begun to question. "Richard, glad you arrived. I heard you had some trouble yesterday." "How did you know?" "Harmony Creek is a small town, my friend. News travels fast." Oscar gave a laugh that did not reach his eyes. "They say you were mugged." "Something like that." Richard sat at the table, studying his partner's face. "Oscar, we need to talk about the latest reports from the Hope Residence's construction site." Oscar's expression changed subtly. "What's wrong with them?" "Some irregularities in the materials used, inferior quality cement, hardware that does not match the project specifications." "Irregularities? Richard, you're being paranoid. All materials were approved by our engineers." "Exactly, and that's the problem." Richard opened his briefcase and spread documents on the table. "These are the original reports from the engineers, and these are the ones in the official files. They are different." Oscar leaned in to examine the papers, but Richard noticed that his hands trembled slightly. The company's assets were at risk if these irregularities were discovered by the competent authorities. "It must be some kind of clerical error," said Oscar, trying to sound casual. "You know how the DMV is." "Oscar, it's 7 different projects, all with the same type of clerical error." The silence that followed was tense. Richard watched his partner process the information, noticing the sweat that began to form on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating that someone is altering official documents of our company. And that could cost us millions in lawsuits if any building has structural problems." Oscar stood up abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the town square where, just a day before, Richard had been humiliated by the bikers. "Richard, we've been partners for 8 years. We built this company together, turned small investments into a business worth millions. Why would I risk all that?" "I don't know, Oscar. Why would you?" "Listen, maybe you should take a vacation. The stress may be affecting your judgment. How about a trip? I know a resort in the Poconos, very quiet, perfect for relaxing." The suggestion sounded more like an order, and Richard felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in Oscar's insistence that made him uncomfortable. "I'll think about it. Do think about it. And Richard, maybe it's best not to mention these theories to anyone else. For the good of the company." When Richard left the office an hour later, his mind was seething with suspicions. The bikers from the previous day, the irregularities in the documents, Oscar's strange reaction. Everything seemed connected in some way that he could not yet fully understand. Back at the mansion, he found Isabel sitting alone in her room, looking out the window with an expression of sadness that broke his heart. The girl had lost the vivacity she had shown the night before. "Isabel, is everything okay?" She turned and forced a small smile. "I'm fine, Mr. Davenport." "Where's Charlotte?" "Mrs. Davenport said she was busy, that I should stay here quietly." Something in the way Isabel spoke made Richard suspect there was more behind those simple words. But before he could investigate, Charlotte appeared in the doorway of the room. "Honey, I didn't hear you arrive. How was your day?" "Complicated." Richard studied his wife's face, looking for clues. "And yours? How was it with Isabel?" "Wonderful. She's a very well-behaved girl." That night, during dinner, Richard noticed that Isabel barely touched her food and spoke even less than the day before. When he asked if she was feeling sick, she just shook her head and whispered that she was tired. While Charlotte retired for her nightly bath, Richard remained in the living room, lost in dark thoughts. He had the feeling that dangerous forces were moving around him, threatening both his business and the girl he had decided to protect. From the upper floor came the muffled sounds of Isabel crying softly, thinking no one could hear her. It was a sound that echoed through the silent mansion like a harbinger of storms to come. The following days established a cruel routine in the Davenport mansion. Every morning Richard left for work, believing he was leaving Isabel safe. And every morning Charlotte began her ritual of psychological torture against the girl. "Good morning, little one," Charlotte would say with fake sweetness, waiting for Clementine to leave for her chores. "Did you sleep well? Didn't have nightmares about going back to the streets?" Isabel had learned to remain silent during these moments, but her big eyes recorded every poisonous word, every cruel smile. Her photographic memory recorded not only the faces of the bikers who attacked Richard, but also every micro-expression of malice from the woman who was supposed to take care of her. One morning, Charlotte decided to intensify her methods. She waited until Clementine left for the market and took Isabel to the basement of the mansion, a dark and damp space that smelled of mold and abandonment. "This will be your special room," announced Charlotte, pushing the girl down the stairs. "When you misbehave, when you make too much noise or bother the adults, you will stay here to think about what you did." The basement was a nightmare for a child who had already faced so many fears. Stacked boxes created menacing shadows, and small noises of rodents echoed through the corners. Charlotte locked the door, leaving Isabel in almost complete darkness. "I'll be back when you learn how to behave," she shouted through the door. Isabel curled up in a corner, hugging her knees to her chest. She did not cry. She had learned that tears did not bring help. Instead, her extraordinary mind began to map every detail of the basement, every sound, every smell, recording everything as evidence of her situation. 2 hours later, when she heard Richard's car arriving, Charlotte quickly went down to release the girl. "Remember," she whispered in a threatening voice, "if you tell him about our special moments, much worse things will happen." Isabel climbed the stairs with trembling legs, arriving in the main room exactly as Richard entered through the door. He noticed immediately that something was wrong. The girl seemed paler, more fragile. "Isabel, are you all right?" She glanced quickly at Charlotte, who was smiling sweetly while arranging flowers in a vase, and then back at Richard. "I'm fine," she lied in a low voice. That night, Richard found Isabel in the garden, sitting under the light of the full moon that illuminated Harmony Creek. The girl was drawing on the ground with a stick, creating figures that he could not identify. "What are you drawing?" "Little birds," she replied without looking up. "Little birds trapped in cages." Something in the melancholy of the answer touched Richard deeply. He sat down next to her on the grass, still damp from the night dew. "You know, Isabel, when I was a kid, I also felt like a trapped little bird sometimes." She stopped drawing and looked at him with her big, curious eyes. "I grew up without parents, bouncing from home to home, never being sure if I would be welcome the next day." Richard picked up another stick and began to draw next to her. "But you know what I learned? Even trapped little birds can sing. What if they forget how to sing?" The question was asked with a wisdom that should not exist in a 4-year-old child. Richard felt his heart clench. Then someone needs to teach them again. He drew an open cage on the ground and showed them that there is a safe world out there. Isabel smiled for the first time in days, a small but genuine smile that illuminated her thin face. Meanwhile, in downtown Harmony Creek, a secret meeting was taking place at Tony's Bar, a dimly lit establishment on the outskirts of town. Oscar Ferreira was sitting at a table in the back of the place, nervously drinking his third beer of the night. The man who approached his table was the same bearded biker who had humiliated Richard days before. His name was Roger Santos, and he did not work alone. "So, boss, what do we do with Davenport? He's asking too many questions," grumbled Oscar, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "He found out about the alterations in the documents. Want us to give him another scare?" "No. This time it was lucky there was no one around when you guys acted. If someone had seen—" Oscar shook his head. "I need something more definitive." Roger leaned over the table, lowering his voice. "More definitive, like? Remember the trip I suggested to him? To the Poconos? If he accepts, you can solve the problem away from here. A road accident is always more convincing. And if he doesn't accept?" Oscar was silent for a long moment, turning the beer bottle between his hands. "Then we'll have to force him to accept." Back at the mansion, Charlotte was on the phone in her room, speaking in a low voice so as not to be heard. "Yes, everything is going as planned," she whispered. "The child won't be a problem for much longer. And Richard, well, he's so distracted with his suspicions about the company that he barely notices what happens at home." The voice on the other end of the line was male and familiar. Although Isabel, who had silently gone upstairs to get a glass of water, could not completely identify it. "Don't worry, darling. Soon we'll be rid of both problems. The money, the company, everything will be ours." Isabel moved away from the door quickly, her small heart beating unevenly. She did not fully understand what she had heard, but her intuition told her that Richard was in danger. The next morning, during breakfast, Oscar made an unexpected visit to the mansion. He arrived smiling and carrying a briefcase of documents, but Isabel immediately noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided Richard's direct gaze. "My friend, I brought the papers from the property in the Poconos. How about we take a look?" Charlotte appeared in the room as if she had been summoned, wearing a dress that highlighted her blue eyes and a smile that did not match her usual coldness. "Oscar, how good to see you. Would you like a coffee?" "With pleasure, Charlotte. You look radiant today." Isabel watched the interaction between the two adults, noting how they greeted each other. A handshake that lasted too long, a look that carried hidden meanings. Her memory recorded every detail, every nuance. "Richard, I really think you should consider this trip," insisted Oscar, spreading maps and photos on the table. The location is perfect for a resort. We could quadruple our net worth with this investment. I don't know, Oscar, with everything that's happening at the company. Exactly because of that. You need fresh air, a new perspective. And it's only for 3 days. Charlotte approached Richard, placing her hand on his shoulder with a gesture that seemed affectionate, but that Isabel perceived as calculated. Honey, maybe it's a good idea after all. You've been so stressed lately. What about Isabel? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Oscar looked at the girl as if he were seeing her for the first time, his small eyes gleaming with something she could not identify. Ah, yes, the famous child who saved you. He squatted down in front of Isabel, studying her face. She has a good memory, doesn't she? Remembers faces. Very good, replied Richard, without realizing the sinister tone in the question. Interesting. Oscar stood up slowly. Well, I'm sure Charlotte will take very good care of her while you're away. The smile that Charlotte gave Isabel was as cold as a Pennsylvania winter, loaded with promises that the girl preferred not to imagine. That afternoon, while Richard debated whether or not to accept the trip, Isabel made a courageous decision. She waited until everyone left the main room and ran to Richard's office, determined to find some way to protect the man who had become her only hope of safety. It was there, carefully rummaging through the papers on the desk, that she made a discovery that would change everything. In Richard's mahogany and leather office, Isabel carefully rummaged through the papers scattered on the desk, her small fingers trembling with nervousness. She knew that if she was discovered there, Charlotte would invent a punishment even worse than the dark basement. Among contracts and financial reports, she found a folder that caught her attention. Inside were photographs, faces of men that her photographic memory recognized instantly. They were the bikers who had attacked Richard in the town square, including Roger Santos, the bearded leader who had commanded the humiliation. But what surprised her most was finding notes in Richard's neat handwriting, fired employees from the Hope Residence's construction site, possible connection with sabotage, investigate connection with Oscar. Isabel could not read completely, but she recognized some words that Clementine had taught her during their conversations in the kitchen. The name Oscar appeared several times, circled with red pen and accompanied by question marks. A loose sheet caught her attention. It was a map of the Poconos with a route marked in red and the word dangerous written in capital letters. Her heart raced when she realized that Richard already suspected the trap that Oscar was setting. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her quickly put away the papers and run behind the leather armchair, hiding just as Charlotte entered the office. "Where are you, you little pest?" Charlotte muttered, searching the house. Isabel held her breath, shrinking even further behind the furniture. Charlotte searched a few rooms before giving up, but her voice echoed through the hallways. "When I find you, you'll find out what happens to overly curious children." Only when she heard the door of Charlotte's room slam shut, Isabel came out of her hiding place. Her childish but extraordinarily perceptive mind began to connect the pieces of the puzzle. The bikers, Oscar, the dangerous trip, Charlotte's whispered conversations. Richard was in danger, and she was the only person who could save him. That night, during dinner, Oscar returned to the mansion with more insistence about the trip. He brought with him a bottle of expensive wine and gifts, imported chocolates for Charlotte, and a teddy bear for Isabel, which the girl received with suspicion. "Richard, my friend, I need a definitive answer. The landowners in the Poconos will only wait until tomorrow." Richard swirled the wine glass between his fingers, clearly divided. His investments on Wall Street had been so successful that he could afford to be cautious, but Oscar's pressure was constant. "It's a unique opportunity," continued Oscar. "The profit potential is extraordinary. We can turn millions into tens of millions." Charlotte leaned over the table, her blue eyes shining with an intensity that made Isabel shrink in her chair. "Honey, you've always been very cautious with business, but sometimes you have to take risks to reap big dividends. Charlotte is right, agreed Oscar, and think of the benefits for Isabel too. With more capital, you could guarantee her future, private education, everything of the best. Upon hearing her name, Isabel looked up from the soup that she could barely swallow. There was something in the way Oscar spoke about her that made her uncomfortable, as if she were a problem to be solved. "All right," sighed Richard finally, "I'll travel on Friday." The smile that Charlotte and Oscar exchanged was so quick that only Isabel's sharp observation managed to capture it. It was a smile of triumph, of mission accomplished. "Excellent," exclaimed Oscar, raising his glass, "a toast to our prosperous future." But while the adults toasted, Isabel noticed something that the others missed. Charlotte's hand on the table, making a discreet gesture that looked like a signal to Oscar, a signal that said, "Everything is ready." After Oscar left, Richard retired to his office to prepare some documents for the trip. Charlotte, with a suspicious energy, announced that she would take a long and relaxing bath. It was then that Isabel made the most courageous decision of her short life. She waited until she was sure that Charlotte was in the bathroom and that Richard was focused on his work. Then, with silent steps learned on the streets, she went down to the kitchen where Clementine was washing the dinner dishes. "Clementine," she whispered, pulling on the housekeeper's skirt. "My dear, you scared me. What are you doing awake at this hour?" Isabel looked around to make sure they were alone, then raised her arms, asking to be carried. Clementine picked her up, feeling how the girl trembled. "Clementine, Mr. Davenport is in danger." "How so, child?" Isabel struggled to find words to express what her intuition and memory had captured. "The bad men. They're going to hurt him on the trip." "What bad men?" "The ones who tied him to the tree. I saw the photos in the office, and Mrs. Davenport, she talks to them on the phone." Clementine felt a chill run down her spine. In her 10 years working at the mansion, she had noticed subtle changes in Charlotte's behavior. Whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. Strange calls received always when Richard was not at home. "Are you sure what you're saying, my little one?" Isabel nodded gravely. "They want his money, and they want him to go away forever." The simplicity with which the girl expressed the situation did not diminish the devastating impact of her words. Clementine understood that she was facing something much more sinister than simple marital problems. "What else did you see or hear?" Mrs. Davenport said on the phone that soon they would be free of the problems, and Mr. Oscar asked if I remember faces. Clementine put Isabel on the floor and knelt down to be at the girl's level. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. You can't tell this to anyone else, understand? Not to Mr. Davenport, not to Mrs. Davenport. It's very dangerous. But he needs to know. He will know, but in the right way. First, I need to find out more things." Clementine gently held the girl's shoulders. "Can you trust me?" Isabel nodded, finding in Clementine's warm eyes the same kindness she had seen in Richard. "Now go to your room and behave normally. Tomorrow we'll start protecting our Mr. Davenport." As Isabel climbed the stairs, she passed the office door and saw Richard hunched over maps and documents, unknowingly planning his own trap. Her small heart ached with the anguish of carrying such a heavy secret. Upstairs, Charlotte finished her bath, humming a cheerful tune, completely unconcerned. In a few hours, she would make an important call to confirm that everything was on track for Friday. But what none of the adults knew was that a 4-year-old girl and a loyal housekeeper had just formed an alliance that would change the course of all the carefully laid plans. That early morning, Isabel took a long time to fall asleep. When she finally did, she dreamed of birds trapped in cages that opened on their own, allowing them to fly away from danger. But upon waking, she remembered that reality was much more complicated than dreams, and that saving Richard would require much more courage than she imagined possessing. The mansion clock struck 2 in the morning when a shadowy figure crossed the garden silently. Someone was watching the Davenport house, waiting for the right moment to ensure that the plans for Friday encountered no obstacles. Thursday dawned with heavy clouds over Harmony Creek, a harbinger of the approaching rain. In the Davenport mansion, the tension was palpable as the humidity in the air. Richard packed his bags for the trip, while Charlotte feigned maternal concern, organizing medications and extra clothes. "Don't forget to take your wool coat," she said, folding the items with excessive care. "The Poconos can be cold at night." Isabel watched everything from her corner in the living room, hugging the teddy bear that Oscar had brought the night before. The toy was supposed to comfort her, but something about its texture bothered her. It was too stiff, as if there was something hidden inside. Clementine appeared with a breakfast tray, and as she passed Isabel, whispered almost inaudibly, "15 minutes in the pantry." The mansion's pantry was in the back of the kitchen, a small, dark place where Clementine kept groceries and cleaning supplies. Isabel arrived first, hiding behind bags of flour that were almost her size. When Clementine entered, she locked the door silently and knelt at the girl's level. "I found out a few things this morning," she whispered. "I woke up earlier and heard Mrs. Davenport on the phone." "What did she say?" "Confirmed times with someone. Talked about a deserted road between Harmony Creek and the Poconos, a place called Hawk's Ridge." Clementine paused, choosing her words carefully so as not to scare the child too much, and said that after today they wouldn't have to worry about problems anymore. Isabel squeezed the teddy bear against her chest, feeling that strange stiffness again. "Clementine, this toy feels weird." The housekeeper examined the brown teddy bear, noting that one of the seams on the back was slightly misaligned. Carefully she opened the seam and found a small electronic device hidden inside the stuffing. "My God," she murmured, recognizing the device. "It's a tracker." "What's that?" "A little thing that shows where you are, like a map that follows you." Clementine gently removed the device. "They wanted to know exactly where you are in the house." Isabel's blood ran cold as she understood the implications. Oscar had not given that gift out of kindness. He was mapping her movements, preparing something. "Clementine, we have to warn Mr. Davenport." "Not yet, my dear. If we tell him now, they'll know we found out and may change their plans to something even worse." The housekeeper put the tracker in her apron pocket. "I need more evidence." At that moment, Charlotte's voice echoed through the house. "Clementine, where are you? I need you to prepare lunch early today." The two separated quickly, Isabel returning to the living room where Richard was still packing his luggage. He noticed the girl's worried expression and approached. "Is everything all right, little one? You look scared." Isabel looked at him with her big, trusting eyes, fighting the desire to tell everything, but she remembered Clementine's words about the danger of acting rashly. "I don't want you to go away," she said, and it was not a lie. Richard knelt beside her, gently touching her face. "It's only for 3 days, I promise. And when I get back, we'll talk about your future here, all right? Do you really promise you'll come back?" The question, asked with an intensity that surprised even Isabel, made Richard pause. There was something in the way she spoke that triggered an instinctive alarm. "Of course, I promise. Why wouldn't I come back?" Before Isabel could answer, Charlotte appeared in the doorway of the room with a radiant smile. "Honey, Oscar just called. He's picking you up at 2 in the afternoon. Said he wants to leave early to make the most of the daylight to examine the land." "At 2? Richard frowned. "I thought we had agreed on 4. Change of plans. You know how eager Oscar is when it comes to good deals." During lunch, a strange atmosphere hung over the table. Charlotte was visibly anxious, constantly fidgeting with her hair and checking the clock. Richard ate in silence, lost in thoughts about the company and the problems he had discovered. Isabel only poked at her food, without appetite. "Aren't you going to eat, little one?" asked Richard, noting that she had barely touched her plate. "I'm not hungry." "She's been a bit cranky lately," commented Charlotte with false concern. "Maybe it's good for you to travel anyway." Time for her to get used to the rules of the house. Something in the way Charlotte spoke made Richard narrow his eyes. What rules? Oh, the normal rules of any well-organized home. Times for eating, playing, sleeping. Children need structure. At 1:45 p.m., Oscar arrived driving a rugged pickup truck, different from his usual car. He greeted Richard with exaggerated enthusiasm and waved casually to Isabel, who hid behind Clementine. "Ready for our business adventure?" "Ready," replied Richard, but his voice carried a hesitation that did not go unnoticed by Isabel. As the men loaded the luggage, Clementine approached Richard discreetly. "Mr. Davenport, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Clementine. Be careful on this trip. There's something strange in the air today." Richard studied the housekeeper's face, recognizing the genuine concern in her eyes. Clementine had worked for his family for over a decade and had a sharp instinct for dangerous situations. "Strange how?" "I can't explain exactly. Just promise you'll be careful." "I promise." When it was time to say goodbye, Isabel clung to Richard's leg with a desperate force that surprised everyone present. "Don't go," she whispered, tears streaming down her small face. "Please, don't go." Richard picked her up, feeling the genuine despair in her trembling arms. "Hey, what's the matter? It's just a business trip." "I have a bad feeling." Charlotte approached with poorly disguised impatience. "Richard, you're going to be late, and it's not good to feed those childish fears." But Richard continued holding Isabel, an inner voice telling him that there was more behind those tears than simple attachment. The girl squeezed something small in his hand. It was a drawing she had made during the morning. "For you to remember me," she said. Richard opened the paper and saw a drawing of a man and a girl holding hands, surrounded by birds flying freely. But in the lower corner, there was something that made him stop. 3 dark figures watching from afar, and a road that ended abruptly in black scribbles. "Isabel, what does this drawing mean?" Before she could answer, Oscar honked impatiently. "Richard, we have to go." With a heavy heart, Richard kissed Isabel's forehead and handed her to Clementine. "Take good care of her," he whispered to the housekeeper. "I always do," replied Clementine, but her eyes said much more. As the pickup truck drove away along the dirt road, raising a cloud of red dust, Isabel remained at the gate holding Clementine's hand. Charlotte had already returned inside the house, but the two remained watching until the vehicle disappeared around the bend in the road. "Clementine," said Isabel in a small but determined voice, "we have to save him. I know, my dear, I know." Meanwhile, in the pickup truck heading north, Richard looked out the window without realizing that Oscar was constantly checking his cell phone, sending short messages to unidentified numbers. In the back seat, hidden among the luggage, was a second suitcase that Richard had not seen being loaded, a suitcase that contained tools that had nothing to do with real estate business. The dark sky finally opened, and rain began to fall over Harmony Creek like tears from the sky itself, foretelling the tragedy that was approaching on the lonely road to the Poconos. As soon as Oscar's pickup truck disappeared around the bend in the road, Charlotte transformed into a completely different person. The fake smile evaporated, replaced by an expression of cold determination that made Isabel instinctively hide behind Clementine. "Well," said Charlotte, clapping her hands with satisfaction, "we can finally have a woman-to-woman talk." Clementine kept Isabel behind her, a protective gesture that did not go unnoticed by Charlotte's calculating eyes. "Clementine, you may retire. I have private matters to discuss with our guest." "With all due respect, Mrs. Davenport, Mr. Davenport asked me to take care of the girl. And I'm saying you don't need to anymore." Charlotte's voice became sharp. "Go prepare dinner, something simple, for 2 people only." The implicit meaning in the words made Clementine's blood run cold. Isabel caught the tension in the air and clung even tighter to the housekeeper's skirt. "Mrs. Davenport, the girl did nothing wrong." "Clementine?" Charlotte pronounced the name with a coldness that cut through the air like a blade. "You work for me. Do as I say." Reluctantly, Clementine stepped aside, but before she did, she whispered to Isabel, "Stay near the kitchen. Anything, you call me." Alone with Charlotte, Isabel felt the same fear she experienced when she was locked in the basement. The woman approached with slow, deliberate steps, like a predator circling its prey. "Now that we don't have an audience anymore," said Charlotte, crouching down to be at Isabel's level, "let's clear up a few things." "I didn't do anything wrong," murmured Isabel, echoing Clementine's words. "Oh, but you did, little one. You did something terrible." Charlotte held Isabel's chin more forcefully than necessary. "You interfered in adult matters. Saw things you shouldn't have seen." Isabel's heart raced. Charlotte knew about her discoveries in Richard's office. "Overly curious children sometimes disappear," continued Charlotte, her sweet voice contrasting with the threatening words. "Especially orphaned children who no one will miss. Mr. Davenport will miss me." Charlotte laughed, an icy sound that echoed through the empty mansion. "Dear Richard isn't coming back from this trip, my dear. Accidents happen on mountain roads." The revelation hit Isabel like a punch. Her suspicions were confirmed in the worst possible way. Richard really was walking into a trap. "You're lying," said Isabel, but her voice trembled. "Am I? Too bad you'll never find out." Charlotte stood up, taking a small bottle out of her dress pocket. "But don't worry, it'll be quick. A few drops in your food tonight and you'll simply fall asleep. Forever." Isabel recognized the bottle. She had seen Charlotte use it before to kill rats in the basement. Her survival instinct, sharpened by the months on the streets, screamed at her to run. "Don't try to escape," said Charlotte, as if reading her thoughts. "The doors are all locked, and Clementine can't help you. She may also suffer a domestic accident if she interferes." At that moment, the living room phone rang. Charlotte answered with a radiant smile, her voice returning to the sweet, artificial tone. "Hello? Oh, Oscar, darling. How? You've already reached the first checkpoint?" She looked at the clock. "Great. Everything is going according to plan here, too." Isabel took advantage of the distraction to move silently towards the kitchen. Her bare feet made no noise on the cold marble as she moved with the agility learned on the streets. "Yes, the situation here will be resolved by tomorrow morning," continued Charlotte on the phone, "and then we can finally enjoy our inheritance." In the kitchen, Clementine was cutting vegetables with hands that trembled visibly. When she saw Isabel appear, she dropped the knife immediately. "My dear, what happened? You're pale." "She wants to hurt me," whispered Isabel, "and said that Mr. Davenport isn't coming back." Clementine knelt and hugged the girl, feeling her small body shake. "What else did she say?" "That she's going to put poison in my food, the same one she uses to kill the rats." Clementine's face hardened with a fury that Isabel had never seen before. "That witch won't lay a finger on you." "But she said the doors are locked, and that you could get hurt too if you help me." Clementine thought quickly. Working in that house for so many years had given her intimate knowledge of every corner, every exit, every secret of the building. "Listen carefully," she said, taking Isabel to the pantry. "Remember the small window in the basement, the one that looks out onto the backyard?" Isabel nodded. She had noticed the window during her punishments in the dark basement. "It's too small for an adult, but you can get through. From the backyard, you can reach the neighbor's house, Mr. Johnson. He's been a friend of Mr. Davenport for years. And you? I'm going to stay here and make her think you're still in the house. But first," Clementine opened a tall cabinet and took out an old phone that Charlotte didn't know existed. "I'm going to call the state police and warn them about Mr. Davenport." While Clementine dialed the number, they heard footsteps approaching the kitchen. Charlotte had finished her call and was coming to look for Isabel. "Quick, to the basement," whispered Clementine, pushing the girl towards the back stairs. Isabel descended the wooden steps that creaked under her feet, her heart beating so hard that she feared the sound might betray her. The basement was dark as always, but now the darkness was her ally. She groped along the walls until she found the small window that Clementine had mentioned. It was a narrow opening, protected by old bars that were loose due to years of moisture. With effort, she managed to move them far enough to get through. From the upper floor came raised voices, Charlotte looking for her and Clementine making excuses about where the girl might be. "She was here a little while ago," Clementine was saying. "Maybe she went to her room. Go get her. Now." Isabel squeezed through the small window, scratching her arms on the rough edges of the stone. Outside, the rain had diminished to a fine drizzle, but the garden was slippery and full of puddles. She ran barefoot through the wet grass, heading to the neighbor's house as Clementine had instructed. Mr. Johnson, a 70-year-old man who had been an engineer before retiring, was watering his plants on the covered porch when he saw the girl appearing among the bushes. "Child, what are you doing out there in this rain?" "Mr. Johnson!" cried Isabel, running to him. "You need to help Mr. Davenport. He's in danger." The old man picked her up, noticing how she was soaked and trembling. "Calm down, child. What danger? The bad men are going to hurt him on the road. Mrs. Davenport set a trap." Johnson had known Richard since the young man had bought the mansion years ago. They had developed a friendship based on mutual respect, and the retired engineer had noticed strange changes in the dynamics of the Davenport house in recent months. "Are you sure of what you're saying?" "I am. Clementine called the police, but maybe it's too late." Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Charlotte discovered the open basement window and exploded in fury. Clementine was still trying to buy time, but she knew that she would not be able to deceive her for much longer. "Where is she?" shouted Charlotte, holding Clementine by the shoulders. "I don't know, Ma'am. I looked all over the house." "You helped her escape." "You traitor!" Charlotte ran to the phone and dialed a number with trembling fingers. When someone answered on the other end, her voice was hysterical. "Change of plans. The girl escaped. She knows everything." The response came in a grave and threatening tone, making Charlotte pale. "I know I messed up, but we can still fix this." At the house next door, Johnson had already called the state police and other contacts he had in the region. As a former city engineer, he knew all the roads between Harmony Creek and the Poconos. "I managed to talk to a police station at Hawks Ridge," he said to Isabel. "They're going to intercept the pickup truck." "What if it's too late?" "Let's hope it's not, my little warrior." While they awaited news, Isabel looked out the window towards the Davenport mansion. She could see Charlotte pacing back and forth in the living room, talking nervously on the phone. The woman who had once seemed merely cold and arrogant now revealed herself to be a desperate and dangerous creature. Johnson's phone rang, making them both jump. Isabel held the old man's hand as he answered. "Hello? Yes, this is he. They got them? Thank God!" He looked at Isabel with a smile. "They found the pickup truck in time. Mr. Davenport is safe." Isabel burst into tears of relief, but she knew that the battle was not over yet. Charlotte was still on the loose, and as long as that was the case, none of them would be truly safe. At Hawks Ridge, 30 miles from Harmony Creek, Richard was leaning against the side of the pickup truck when the state troopers arrived with sirens blaring. The rain had stopped, but the asphalt was still slippery, creating perfect conditions for the accident that Oscar had planned. "Documents!" ordered Sergeant Miller, an experienced man who had received an urgent call about a possible attempted crime. Oscar tried to maintain his composure, but his hands trembled visibly as he handed over the papers. "Is there a problem, officer? We're just going to the Poconos on business. We received an anonymous tip about suspicious activities involving this vehicle." Richard frowned, confused. "What kind of tip?" "Mr. Davenport, I need you to open the trunk of the pickup truck." As Oscar protested nervously, the officer inspected the luggage. In addition to Richard's bags, he found strange tools, ropes, a folding shovel, and containers with substances that had nothing to do with a business trip. "Oscar," said Richard slowly, the realization hitting him like a bolt of lightning. "What are these things?" I can explain, Mr. Ferreira," interrupted the sergeant. "You're under arrest on suspicion of attempted crime. You have the right to remain silent." As Oscar was handcuffed, shouting about misunderstandings and setups, Richard remained in shock by the side of the road. The betrayal of his partner of 8 years, someone he had trusted with half of his fortune, was like a stab in the chest. "Mr. Davenport," said the sergeant, "I suggest you go home. There are indications that your life was in real danger." On the way back to Harmony Creek, driving the pickup truck under police escort, Richard's mind was seething with questions. How had he not noticed the signs? How many of the irregularities in the company were Oscar's work? And more importantly, who had made the tip that had saved him? Upon arriving at the Davenport mansion, he found a scene he would never forget. In the front yard, Charlotte was being escorted by 2 local police officers, her hands cuffed behind her back and her face distorted by fury. "Richard!" she shouted upon seeing him. "Thank God you're okay. These police officers have gone crazy. They're accusing me of absurd things." But Richard looked past her and saw Isabel on the porch of neighbor Johnson's house, holding the old man's hand. The girl was pale and trembling, but her eyes shone with relief upon seeing him safe and sound. "What's going on here?" asked Richard to Chief Thompson, who was coordinating the operation. "Mr. Davenport, we received a detailed report about a plan to assassinate you, involving your wife and Mr. Oscar Ferreira. There are also serious charges against Mrs. Charlotte for attempted poisoning against the minor." Richard felt the world spin around him. Poisoning? Against Isabel? The housekeeper, Mrs. Clementine, found rat poison in the child's room and called the station. The little one had to escape through the basement window to save her own life. Charlotte laughed hysterically. "This is ridiculous. You're going to believe stories invented by a housekeeper and a street child?" It was then that Clementine appeared at the door of the mansion, carrying a box of evidence she had collected. "Mr. Davenport, you need to see this." Inside the box were documents that Charlotte had hidden, bank statements showing regular transfers to Oscar's accounts, receipts for the purchase of rat poison, and even more shocking, correspondence detailing the plan to eliminate both Richard and Isabel. "Charlotte," said Richard, his voice filled with a deep pain. "Why?" "For money, of course," she exploded, all pretense of innocence abandoned. "Did you think I was going to stay married to an orphan for the rest of my life? Oscar offered me a real life, not this provincial farce. And Isabel, an innocent child? That pest saw too much, and you cared more about her than me." Charlotte spat the words like venom. "You'd rather give your fortune to a beggar than to your own wife." The chief intervened before the situation deteriorated further. "Mrs. Charlotte Davenport, you're under arrest for attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, and attempted poisoning." As Charlotte was led to the police car, still shouting accusations and threats, Richard walked slowly to where Isabel was waiting. The girl ran to him, and when they hugged, they both began to cry, he of relief and regret, she of pure emotional exhaustion. "You saved me," whispered Richard. "How did you know?" "I saw the pictures in your office. And Mrs. Davenport said bad things on the phone." Isabel looked at him with her big, serious eyes. "You said that trapped birds can learn to sing again. I learned." That night, after the police had left and Clementine had prepared a simple dinner, Richard, Isabel, and the housekeeper sat in the kitchen in contemplative silence. The mansion seemed different without Charlotte's toxic presence, lighter, more welcoming. "Clementine," said Richard finally, "I don't know how to thank you for protecting Isabel." "You don't need to thank me, sir. That girl is special. She has a courage that many adults don't have." Isabel played with the food on her plate, still processing the traumatic events of the day. "Mr. Davenport, now that Mrs. Davenport is gone, can I stay?" The simple question carried so much emotional weight that Richard needed a moment to answer. "Isabel, do you want to stay?" "I want to. But only if you want me to stay too. More than anything in the world." The next day, While Richard dealt with lawyers and legal issues related to the arrest of Charlotte and Oscar, a surprising discovery came to light. Among the documents seized at Oscar's house, the police found files that revealed the true extent of the corruption at Davenport and Ferreira Construction. Oscar had diverted millions of dollars over the years using shell companies and forged documents. Even more shocking, he had intentionally sabotaged several buildings of the company, creating structural risks that could cause collapses in the future. "Mr. Davenport," explained the civil defense engineer, "we found evidence that at least 7 buildings built by your company in the last 3 years have serious foundation problems. It's a miracle that none have collapsed yet." The discovery meant that Richard would have to use a large part of his fortune to repair the damage and compensate the affected residents. His investments on Wall Street, his investments in bitcoins, everything would have to be liquidated to cover the costs. "Are we going to be poor?" asked Isabel when Richard explained the situation to her that night. "Not poor, but definitely not as rich as before," he replied honestly. "Does that bother you?" Isabel thought for a moment. "When I lived on the street, I had nothing. Here I have you, Clementine, a warm bed and food every day. For me, that's already being rich." The simple wisdom of the answer touched Richard deeply. He realized that true wealth was not in his bank accounts or investments, but in the unconventional family he had found. 3 days later, when Richard returned from the office after an exhausting day dealing with the restructuring of the company, he found Isabel in the garden drawing on the ground with sticks. But this time, her drawings were different. Instead of trapped birds, she had drawn a house with 3 figures in front, a tall man, a middle-aged woman with an apron, and a small girl in the middle. Everyone was smiling, and colorful birds, represented by painted pebbles, flew freely around them. "It's our family," she explained when Richard sat next to her on the grass. "Our family," he repeated, liking the sound of the words. Clementine appeared at the kitchen door, drying her hands on her apron. "Dinner's ready." As they walked together into the house, Isabel took Richard's hand. "Mr. Davenport." "Yes?" "Thank you for teaching me that birds can learn to sing again. Thank you for teaching me that some cages can be opened from the inside out." That night, for the first time since Isabel had arrived at the Davenport mansion, the house was truly at peace. There were no dark secrets, no whispered threats, no fear. Just an unlikely family that had found each other through suffering and chosen to remain united through love. 2 weeks after the arrest of Charlotte and Oscar, life in the Davenport mansion had found a new and surprisingly harmonious rhythm. Richard worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused by the corruption in his company, selling assets and liquidating investments to compensate the families affected by the defective buildings. His investments in bitcoins, which had once been worth millions, were converted into real money to cover the engineering costs necessary to make the buildings safe. The wealth that had taken years to accumulate through Wall Street was being used to fix Oscar's mistakes. "We lost another contract today," said Richard to Clementine while having coffee in the kitchen, a routine that had become precious to him. "The company's reputation is destroyed. Things will get better, sir. You're an honest man, and that always ends up being recognized." Isabel, sitting at the small table that Richard had specially made for her, was drawing in a new notebook. Her illustrations had evolved. Now she showed not only free birds, but people helping each other, houses being repaired, families smiling. "Mr. Davenport," she said without looking up from the drawing, "are you sad that you lost money?" "A little," he admitted, "but not for the money itself. I'm sad because many families were harmed because of my lack of attention, but you're fixing everything now. I'm trying." At that moment, the phone rang. Clementine answered and called Richard with a worried expression. "It's Dr. Peterson, the lawyer." Dr. Peterson, the lawyer who was handling the case against Charlotte and Oscar, brought disturbing news. "Richard, I need to tell you something important." Charlotte is pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard sat heavily in his armchair, processing the information. Pregnant? Are you sure? The prison medical exams confirmed it. 2 months of gestation. Is the baby mine? Apparently not. The dates coincide with the period in which she was already having a relationship with Oscar. She herself confirmed paternity during the interrogation. Richard ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of yet another revelation. What now? Pregnancy may influence her sentence. The judge may be more lenient, considering that she carries a child who will be raised by a murderer. Exactly. That's why I'm suggesting that you consider legal action to obtain custody of the baby when it's born. The idea hit Richard like a lightning bolt. Another potential orphan, another child who could grow up in a toxic environment or in cold institutions. I need to think about it. That night, Richard talked to Isabel about the situation. The girl, now almost 5 years old and much more mature due to the experiences she had lived through, listened attentively. You mean there's going to be a baby who needs care? Maybe. I don't know for sure yet. Isabel was quiet for a long time, drawing spirals on the paper. Babies are like birds that have just hatched. They need a lot of care. That's true. And if nobody takes care of them properly, they get sad and scared like I used to be. That's right. Then maybe we should take care of this baby too. The simplicity of Isabel's logic touched Richard deeply. She, who had suffered so much, was willing to share her new family with another child in need. Meanwhile, at the Harmony Creek police station, Charlotte received an unexpected visit. It was Roger Santos, the leader of the bikers who had attacked Richard. He had been arrested 3 days after the events at Hawks Ridge, when the police tracked down his connections with Oscar. "You screwed everything up," he said through gritted teeth, speaking through the bars that separated the male and female cells. "Because of your incompetence. We lost millions." "I didn't know the girl was so clever," defended Charlotte, one hand over her still imperceptible belly. "Clever? She was a 4-year-old child. You were defeated by a child. What now? What do we do?" Roger smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. "Now we pay for what we did, but that doesn't mean Davenport is going to live happily ever after." "What do you mean?" "I have friends on the outside, friends who don't like to see honest people thriving after destroying lucrative businesses." Back at the mansion, practical changes were being implemented. Richard had dismissed most of the staff, keeping only Clementine, who was now more of a family friend than an employee. The luxurious house was gradually being adapted for a simpler but happier life. The room that once belonged to Charlotte was transformed into a study room for Isabel, where Clementine taught her to read and write more deeply. The girl absorbed knowledge like a sponge, her photographic memory facilitating learning. "Look, Mr. Davenport," said Isabel one afternoon, showing a sentence she had written herself. "My family loves me and I love my family." "That's perfect, little one." Clementine said that when I know how to read and write very well, I can help you with the company papers. The idea made Richard smile for the first time in days. "It would be an honor to have you as a partner." A week later, Dr. Peterson brought more news. The trial of Charlotte and Oscar has been scheduled for next month. And there's something else. Oscar is trying to make a deal with the prosecutor's office. What kind of deal? He wants to confess everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He says he has information about other corruption schemes in the region. And Charlotte maintains her version that she was manipulated by Oscar, claims she was afraid and had no choice. Do you believe it? Frankly, no. The evidence shows that she was an active participant, not a victim. But the pregnancy complicated things. That night, an unexpected event tested the new stability of the Davenport family. Isabel woke up screaming from a nightmare, something that had not happened for weeks. Richard ran to her room and found her curled up in bed, trembling. "What is it, little one?" I dreamed that Mrs. Davenport came back and you left again." Richard picked her up, feeling how she clung to him with desperate force. "That's not going to happen ever. Charlotte is in jail, and she's going to be in jail for a long time. But what if she gets out? What if she comes back to get me?" "She won't come back, and even if she tried, I'd be here to protect you." Clementine appeared at the door of the room, awakened by the screams. "Is everything okay?" "Nightmares," explained Richard. "It's normal," said Clementine, entering the room. "Traumas take time to heal completely. But each day gets a little easier." They stayed with Isabel until she fell asleep again, a silent vigil that further strengthened the bonds between them. The next day, Richard made an important decision. He gathered Isabel and Clementine in the living room and made an announcement that would change everything once again. "I've decided to file the official petition for Isabel's adoption." The girl's face lit up with a joy that seemed capable of warming the whole house. "Adoption means I'm going to be your real daughter, forever and officially. And no one can take me away ever again?" "Never again." Isabel jumped into Richard's lap, hugging him tightly. "What about Mrs. Davenport's baby? If we get custody, you'd have a little brother or sister. I'd really like that. That way he wouldn't be alone like I was." That afternoon, while filling out the first adoption papers, a letter arrived at the mansion. It was from the state prison, written by Charlotte herself. "Richard," the letter read in trembling handwriting, "I know you hate me, and you have every right to. But I ask you to think of my child. He is not to blame for my mistakes. If you can find in your heart the ability to forgive, please give that child the chance that I never had to grow up in a family that really loves." The letter ended with a confession that changed everything. "I always knew you were a better man than I deserved. Isabel was lucky to find you. I hope my son has the same luck." Richard slowly folded the letter, realizing that Charlotte, in her prison, had finally found something resembling genuine remorse. "What does the letter say?" Isabel asked. "It says we're going to have another member in our family soon." As the sun set over Harmony Creek, painting the sky in golden hues, the small, unlikely family prepared to grow once more, ready to welcome another needy soul and transform pain into love. 3 months after Charlotte's letter, life in Harmony Creek had found a new equilibrium, although the shadow of future uncertainties still lingered over the Davenport family. Richard had managed to minimally stabilize his business, focusing on small renovation and consulting projects, a drastic change from his previous empire, but one that brought him genuine satisfaction. Isabel's adoption process was progressing well, but an unexpected obstacle had arisen. During one of the hearings at the Harmony Creek courthouse, an unknown woman came forward claiming kinship with the girl. "My name is Aparecida Santos," she told the judge, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and simple clothes. "I'm Isabel's aunt on her father's side. I came from the Poconos as soon as I learned that my niece was alive." Richard's heart sank. Beside him, Isabel gripped his hand tightly, her big eyes filled with fear. The possibility of losing the girl to an unknown relative was terrifying. "Where were you when the child needed help?" asked Dr. Peterson, representing Richard. "I didn't know she existed," Aparecida replied, tears in her eyes. "My brother and I fell out years ago over money. When I heard about the accident that took his life and his wife's, I didn't know they had a daughter." The judge studied the documents presented by Aparecida, confirming her relationship to Isabel's deceased father. The legal situation was complex. Although Richard had cared for the girl for months, a biological relative had preferential rights under the law. "Your Honor," said Dr. Peterson, "I would like to request a period of psychological evaluation to determine the best interests of the child." "Granted. The evaluation will be conducted by social worker Dr. Carla Morera in the next 2 weeks." That night, Isabel barely touched her dinner. She played with the food on her plate, lost in thoughts that were too heavy for a child her age. "Are you going to give me to that woman?" she finally asked, her voice almost inaudible. Never, Richard replied firmly. We're going to fight for our family, no matter what. But is she my real aunt? It seems so. But being a blood relative doesn't automatically mean being family. Family is who cares, who loves, who is present in difficult times. Clementine approached the table, placing her hand caringly on Isabel's shoulder. My dear, no matter what happens, you will always have a home here, and you will always have people who love you. 2 days later, Dr. Carla Morera arrived at the Davenport mansion to begin the evaluation. She was a competent woman in her 50s, known for her dedication to children in vulnerable situations. Isabel, she said, sitting down to the girl's level in the living room, I came here to talk to you about your feelings and wishes. I want to stay with Daddy Richard and Clementine. I understand. And why do you want to stay here? Because they saved me. When I was very scared and hungry, they gave me food, love, and protected me from the bad people. Do you remember life before you came here? Isabel's face clouded over. I remember when my parents died in the accident. I remember being alone on the street, cold and hungry. I remember sleeping in dark places and being scared. And since you arrived here I learned not to be afraid. Daddy Richard taught me that caged birds can learn to sing again. Clementine taught me to read and write, and I helped save Daddy Richard from the bad men. Dr. Carla made careful notes, observing not only Isabel's words, but also her body language, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about Richard and Clementine. Isabel, would you like to meet your Aunt Aparecida? The girl hesitated. Is she good like Daddy Richard? We don't know yet. That's why I'm here, to find out what's best for you. The next day, a meeting was arranged between Isabel and Aparecida in Dr. Carla's office. Richard and Clementine remained in the waiting room, anxious and apprehensive. Aparecida brought old photographs of her brother, Isabel's father, trying to evoke family memories in the girl. Look, here's your dad when he was young. You have his eyes. Isabel examined the photos with interest, vaguely recognizing some familiar features. He was handsome. He was. And he was very smart like you. He could draw very well, just like you. Why did you fight? Aparecida sighed deeply. Over silly adult things, money, pride, things that I now realize were not important. And where do you live? In the Poconos, in a small but cozy apartment. I have a job as a seamstress and I could take good care of you. Isabel was quiet, processing the information. But in the Poconos, I won't see Daddy Richard anymore. Well, it would be difficult. The Poconos are far from here. Then I don't want to go. The simplicity of the answer surprised Aparecida. But child, I'm your real family, your blood. Daddy Richard said that family isn't just blood. It's who cares for you when you're sick, who protects you when you're afraid, who teaches you important things. That night, Aparecida spoke at length with Dr. Carla in private. Doctor, I can see that the girl is happy here. But doesn't the law say that relatives have priority? The law prioritizes the best interests of the child, Mrs. Santos. And in Isabel's case, she has already established deep bonds here. Removing her would be traumatic. But I really want to take care of her. I feel like I owe it to my brother. May I suggest something? Why don't you spend a few weeks here in Harmony Creek? You can get to know Isabel better, and she can get to know you. If you develop a natural bond, perhaps we can find a solution that benefits everyone. Aparecida accepted the suggestion and stayed at the small inn in downtown Harmony Creek. During the following days, she made regular visits to the Davenport mansion, always supervised by Dr. Carla. Gradually, an interesting dynamic developed. Aparecida proved to be a genuinely good woman who truly wanted the best for Isabel. She had no ulterior motives or financial interests. She simply felt she had a family responsibility. You know, she said to Richard during one of those visits, I see how you look at her. It's the same look my brother had when he talked about the dreams he had for the future. Isabel has completely changed my life, Richard admitted. She taught me what it is to love unconditionally, and I can see that she loves you the same way. It was during these conversations that an unusual idea began to form. Aparecida, observing Isabel's genuine happiness in the mansion, made a decision that surprised everyone. "Dr. Peterson," she said at a meeting with everyone involved, "I would like to withdraw my claim for guardianship." The silence that followed was deafening. "Are you sure about this?" the lawyer asked. "Absolutely, but I would like to make a request. I would like to remain in Isabel's life as her aunt. Maybe move to Harmony Creek if I can find work here." Isabel, who had been tense throughout the discussion, ran to Aparecida and hugged her. "Can you be my visiting aunt? If you want, I can be your aunt who lives nearby and comes to visit you often. I would really like that." That night, Richard received a call that would change everything once again. It was from the state penitentiary. Charlotte had gone into premature labor. "Mr. Davenport," the nurse said, "the child was born, but there are complications. Charlotte is very weak and has specifically asked to speak with you." "How is the baby?" "It's a girl, small but healthy. She's currently in the neonatal intensive care unit as a precaution." Richard looked at Isabel, who was playing quietly on the floor of the living room, and made a decision. "We're going to the hospital." "Can I go too?" Isabel asked. "If you want to meet your little sister, yes." At the hospital, a surreal scene awaited them. Charlotte was pale and frail in a hospital bed, very different from the calculating woman who had almost destroyed their lives. When she saw Richard and Isabel enter the room, she began to cry. "Richard, thank you for coming. And Isabel." She looked at the girl with an expression of deep regret. "Can I ask you for forgiveness?" Isabel approached the bed timidly. "Are you not going to hurt me anymore?" "Never again. I was very sick in my heart, but now I understand how special you are." "Where's the baby?" Isabel asked. "In the special room for small babies. Do you want to meet her?" In the neonatal intensive care unit, through the glass, they saw a tiny creature with dark hair sleeping peacefully in an incubator. She was as fragile as Isabel had been, but there was a serenity on her face that touched everyone present. "What's her name?" Isabel asked. Charlotte looked at Richard. "I would like you to choose the name. She will be your daughter." "Hope," Isabel said immediately. "Because babies are always a new hope." And so, on a rainy March afternoon in Harmony Creek, the Davenport family gained another member, completing a circle of love that had begun with suffering but was destined to end with the purest joy. 6 months after Hope's birth, the Davenport mansion had completely transformed. What was once a silent and formal house now echoed with children's laughter, baby cries, and warm conversations between a family that grew each day in love and complicity. Isabel, now fully 5 years old, had adapted perfectly to the role of older sister. She took her responsibility very seriously, helping Clementine with bottles and singing lullabies that she improvised to soothe the baby when she cried. "Hope is growing very fast," Aparecida commented during one of her weekly visits. She had found employment as a seamstress in the only clothing store in Harmony Creek and rented a small but cozy house near the central square. "Isabel says she's going to be very smart," Richard replied, watching the two sisters playing on the living room rug. "And from the way she observes everything around her, I think she's right." The financial situation had stabilized at a more modest but sustainable level. Richard had sold most of his luxurious assets, keeping only what was essential to keep the family comfortable. His investments were now more conservative, focused on fixed-income funds that guaranteed long-term security. "Daddy," said Isabel, getting up from the floor where she was playing with Hope, "the school is having a science fair next month. Can I participate?" "Of course you can, little one. What do you want to do your project on?" "I want to talk about memory, how some people remember more things than others." Richard smiled, not surprised by the choice. Isabel's photographic memory continued to impress everyone, and she had begun to understand that she possessed a special gift. But not everything was rosy in the Davenport family's life. One Thursday morning, Dr. Peterson arrived at the house with a worried expression that immediately alerted Richard. "We have a problem," the lawyer said, sitting down in the living room. "Charlotte is trying to regain custody of Hope." "What? She gave up the child?" "Apparently she regretted it. She got a new lawyer who is claiming that she was under postpartum stress when she signed the transfer of custody papers." Richard felt the world spin around him. The idea of losing Hope, after months of caring for her as a daughter, was unbearable. Does she have a chance of winning? Technically, yes. The biological link still carries legal weight, especially if she can prove that she was mentally compromised at the time of the decision. Isabel, who was playing quietly in the corner of the room, looked up with a worried expression. Her exceptional memory had recorded every word of the conversation. "Daddy, does Mrs. Davenport want to take Hope away?" Richard knelt beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. "She's trying, little one, but we're going to fight to keep our family together." "But why? She didn't want Hope before. Why does she want her now?" It was a simple question, but it touched on the heart of the matter. Dr. Peterson explained that, according to his sources, Charlotte had changed drastically in prison after the birth of her daughter. Apparently, she developed an obsession with the child. She talks about Hope constantly and has created elaborate fantasies about what their life will be like together, and she refuses to accept that she may not have custody. Is that good for us? It's evidence that she's not mentally stable enough to care for a child. I'm going to use that to strengthen our case. That night, Richard had trouble sleeping. He walked through the silent house, stopping in the girls' room to watch them sleeping. Isabel had insisted that Hope sleep in the same room as her, to protect her from nightmares, as she had explained. The next morning, an unexpected news changed everything. Clementine appeared in the kitchen with the local newspaper in her hands, her face pale with concern. "Mr. Davenport, you need to see this." The headline read, "Ex-partner of jailed businessman plans revenge." The article revealed that associates of Oscar, still at large, had publicly threatened Richard, blaming him for the arrest of their business partner. "That explains some strange things that happened this week," Richard murmured, remembering unfamiliar cars that passed slowly in front of the mansion and silent phone calls. "Maybe we should move temporarily," Clementine suggested. "I'm not going to run. This is our house, our life." But the concern was justified. 2 days later, during a visit by Aparecida, a disturbing incident occurred. Isabel was playing in the front yard when an unknown man approached the gate. "Hey, pretty girl," he called out. "Is your father home?" Something in the man's tone of voice awakened Isabel's sharp instincts. She ran into the house, shouting for Richard. "Daddy!" "There's a strange man outside." When Richard arrived at the gate, the man had disappeared, but had left a note scribbled on a piece of paper. "Pay for what you did, or your family will pay." Dr. Peterson was called immediately and, after consulting local authorities, recommended security measures. "Richard, these men are dangerous. I suggest you hire private protection." "I no longer have the resources for that. Most of my assets were used to repair the damage to the company." It was then that Aparecida made a surprising offer. "Richard, if you accept, I would like to help financially. I have some savings saved." "Aparecida, I can't accept. It's not charity. It's family taking care of family. Isabel and Hope are my nieces now, and I would do anything to protect them." The offer touched Richard deeply, but before he could respond, Isabel made an observation that changed everyone's perspective. "Aunt Aparecida, remember when you said you fought with my dad over money? Maybe now you can fix that by helping us." The child's simple wisdom made Aparecida cry. "You're right, my dear. That's exactly what I'm going to do." With Aparecida's financial help, Richard hired a discreet security guard to watch the property. But the most effective protection measure came from an unexpected source. Mr. Johnson, the retired engineer neighbor who had helped Isabel on the night of the escape, organized an informal surveillance network with other residents of the area. "We take care of each other here," he said. "These thugs will find that messing with a family from Harmony Creek means messing with the whole town." During this tense period, something beautiful happened. Hope pronounced her first word, Dodo, trying to say Isabel. The older sister was ecstatic and spent the whole day telling everyone she met. "She said my name first," Isabel told Clementine. "Does that mean she loves me more?" "It means that you are the most important person in her little world," Clementine replied affectionately. The bond between the two sisters grew stronger every day. Hope constantly looked for Isabel, calming down only when she saw her. And Isabel had completely assumed the protective role, rarely leaving the baby's side for long. A week later, Dr. Peterson brought news about Charlotte's case. "There are interesting developments," he said. "I spoke with the prison psychologist. He does not recommend that Hope be returned to Charlotte." "Why?" "Her behavior towards her daughter is becoming obsessively worrying. She talks about the child constantly, has created elaborate fantasies about what their life will be like together, and refuses to accept that she may not have custody. Is that good for us? It is evidence that she is not mentally stable enough to care for a child. I will use this to strengthen our case." That night, during the family dinner, Richard, Isabel, Hope in the high chair, Clementine, and Aparecida, a palpable sense of togetherness permeated the table. Despite all the adversities, threats, and legal uncertainties, they had built something precious together. "Daddy," said Isabel, looking around the table, "our family is getting bigger and bigger. And stronger too," added Aparecida. "No matter what happens," said Richard, raising his glass of juice, "we will always have each other." Hope babbled something incomprehensible but cheerful, making everyone laugh. In that moment, surrounded by love and determination, they prepared to face together the challenges that were yet to come, knowing that true love always finds a way to prevail over adversity. Outside, night fell silently on Harmony Creek, but inside the Davenport mansion, a chosen family grew stronger with each shared moment, ready to fight for their happiness against any obstacle. Autumn had arrived in Harmony Creek, bringing with it an atmosphere of change that seemed to reflect the transformations in the life of the Davenport family. The golden leaves falling in the mansion's garden created a natural carpet where Isabel played with Hope, now 8 months old and trying to take her first steps. "Daddy, look!" Isabel shouted one afternoon in May. "Hope almost managed to walk on her own!" Richard watched from his chair on the porch, a genuine smile on his face as he reviewed company documents. His business had gradually recovered, focusing on smaller but honest projects that brought him personal satisfaction beyond the modest profits. The tranquility, however, was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Peterson, with a grave expression that Richard had learned to fear. "We have an urgent situation," the lawyer said, climbing the steps of the porch. "Charlotte escaped from prison." Richard's blood ran cold. "How did she escape?" "During transport to a medical appointment. Apparently she had been planning it for weeks. The guards were found unconscious, probably drugged. And now? The police are searching, but..." Dr. Peterson hesitated. "There are indications that she is not alone. Roger Santos also disappeared from prison last week." Isabel, who was playing close enough to hear the conversation, felt a familiar chill run down her spine. Her photographic memory immediately brought up vivid images of the bearded biker who had tortured Richard in the square. "Daddy," she said softly, approaching with Hope in her arms, "are they going to try to hurt us again?" Richard picked her up in his arms along with the baby, feeling the weight of responsibility for 2 lives so precious. "I won't let anything happen to you." "Richard," said Dr. Peterson, I strongly recommend that you leave town for a few days, until the police capture the fugitives. Where would we go? I have a property in Pennsylvania near Gettysburg. It's isolated, safe, and few know the place. Before Richard could answer, Clementine appeared running from the kitchen, the cordless phone in her hand. "Mr. Davenport, it's a strange call. The person didn't want to identify themselves, but they said it's about Hope." With his heart pounding, Richard answered the phone. The voice on the other end was female, but distorted, as if speaking through a cloth. "Richard Davenport. Who is this?" "Someone who wants back what belongs to her. You have 24 hours to take Hope to the old Harmony Creek Cemetery, alone. If you don't show up or if you bring the police, your whole family will pay." "Charlotte, is that you?" 24 hours, Richard. "And make no mistake, we are watching your every move." The call was cut off, leaving everyone in tense silence. Isabel watched Richard's face, her sharp intuition picking up on the mortal danger of the situation. "It was her, wasn't it?" the girl asked. "It was. And she wants Hope?" "She does." Isabel looked at the little sister in her arms, who was innocently playing with her hair. "But Hope is our family now. And family doesn't abandon family." The determination in the voice of the 5-year-old touched everyone present deeply. Dr. Peterson immediately called the police, but Chief Thompson brought discouraging news. "Mr. Davenport, we found the car they used in the escape. It's abandoned on the road to Lancaster. They could be anywhere within a 60-mile radius." "What about the threat?" "We don't recommend that you attend the meeting. It's obviously a trap. But if I don't go, they might come after my family." That night, Richard gathered everyone in the living room for a serious conversation. Aparecida had been called and arrived immediately, leaving her shop closed. Mr. Johnson was also present, along with 2 neighbors who offered to help. "I'm not going to lie to you," Richard said. "We're in real danger. But we have an advantage. We know they're coming to us." "What kind of advantage is that?" asked Aparecida. "We can prepare." Mr. Johnson, with his engineering experience, began to draw up a plan. "The mansion has good visibility in all directions. If we strategically position people, we can detect any approach." "What about the police?" "They will be on standby, but at a distance. If Charlotte and Roger notice police movement, they may flee and try again at another time." During the early hours of the morning, Isabel woke up with Hope crying in her crib. When she went to comfort her, she noticed strange lights moving in the backyard. "Clementine," she whispered, running to the maid's room. "There are people outside." Clementine woke up immediately and looked out the window. 3 shadowy figures were moving silently among the trees, clearly reconnoitering the terrain. "Go get Mr. Davenport, quick." In minutes, the whole house was on alert. Richard discreetly called the police while observing the invaders through binoculars. "It's them," he confirmed. "Charlotte and 2 men, one of them definitely Roger." "What do we do?" asked Aparecida, hugging Isabel protectively. "We wait. They're going to try to get in, and when they do, we'll be ready." But Charlotte was more astute than they expected. Instead of breaking into the house, she positioned herself at the entrance of the property and called the landline. "Richard, I know you're watching us. Bring Hope here or we'll start shooting at the house." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Roger has a shotgun pointed at the children's bedroom window right now." Richard looked out the window and saw the glint of metal in the moonlight. It was true. "What do you want, Charlotte?" "My daughter, that's all. Give me Hope and we'll go away forever." "To raise her as fugitives. What kind of life would that be?" "A free life. Free from judges, social workers, people who don't understand a mother's love for her daughter." Isabel, who was listening to everything, did something completely unexpected. Before any adult could stop her, she ran to the front door and opened it. "Isabel, no!" Richard shouted. But the girl was already outside, walking bravely toward the gate where Charlotte was waiting for her. "Mrs. Davenport," said Isabel with a clear voice that echoed in the silent night. "Do you want to talk to me?" Charlotte lowered the gun, surprised by the child's appearance. "Isabel, What are you doing here? I came to talk about Hope. She's my daughter. I have a right to her. You have a right, yes, but right is not the same thing as love. The simplicity of the observation caught Charlotte off guard. I love my daughter. Then why do you want to take her to live on the run? Why do you want her to grow up scared like I grew up on the street? It's not the same thing. It is. Hope here has family. She has a home. She has security. If you really love her, you won't want her to suffer. Roger, impatient, shouted from his position, "Enough talk. Grab the kid and let's go." But something extraordinary was happening. Charlotte looked at Isabel with an expression of painful recognition, as if seeing for the first time the brave child she had tried to destroy. You forgive me for what I did to you?" "I forgive you," said Isabel without hesitation. "But I can't let you do the same thing to Hope." "Charlotte," Roger shouted again, "either we do this now, or I do it alone." It was at that moment that police sirens echoed in the distance. Roger, realizing that he had been betrayed by his own impatience, raised the shotgun toward Isabel. "If I can't have the child, no one can." But before he could shoot, Charlotte threw herself in front of Isabel, shouting, "No! She's innocent!" The blast of the shot echoed through the night, followed by screams and the sound of police cars arriving quickly. When the dust settled, Roger was being detained by the police, and Charlotte was on the ground, wounded but alive, being cared for by Isabel, who was crying over her. "Why did you save me?" the girl asked. "Because I finally understood what it is to be a real mother," Charlotte whispered. "It's to protect, not to possess." That morning at the Harmony Creek Hospital, while Charlotte recovered from a shoulder wound, she made a statement that would change everything forever. In the presence of Dr. Peterson, the police, and Richard, she definitively renounced any rights to Hope. "I want her to grow up happy and safe," she said, signing the papers with a trembling hand. "And I know that with Richard and Isabel, she will have that." When they returned home, the sun was rising over Harmony Creek, painting the sky in golden tones that seemed to promise a better future. Hope slept peacefully in Richard's arms, oblivious to the drama that had almost separated her from her family. "Daddy," said Isabel, walking beside him, "are we safe forever now?" "Now we are," he replied, kissing the forehead of the brave daughter who had saved not only Hope, but also the tormented soul of Charlotte. The Davenport family had faced its biggest storm and come out stronger on the other side, ready to embrace the future with courage and love. 6 months after the final confrontation with Charlotte, the town of Harmony Creek was preparing for its traditional 4th of July celebration. An event that brought the entire community together in the central square where, almost 2 years earlier, Isabel had saved Richard from the bikers. The transformation in the life of the Davenport family seemed to have found its perfect rhythm. Hope, now 1 year and 2 months old, walked through the house with determined steps, following Isabel everywhere like a loving shadow. Her first words had evolved into simple sentences. "Belle, come," was her favorite expression when she wanted the attention of her older sister. "Daddy, can I take Hope to see the fireworks at the celebration?" Isabel asked during breakfast, carefully cutting fruit into small pieces for her little sister. "Of course you can go," Richard replied, watching the dynamic between the two with tenderness, "but we'll all go together. It will be our first celebration as a complete family." Aparecida arrived early that morning, bringing traditional celebration outfits that she had sewn, especially for the girls. For Isabel, a blue dress with ruffles and embroidered flowers. For Hope, a miniature version in shades of pink. "You're going to be the prettiest princesses at the celebration," the aunt said, helping to dress the children. Clementine had prepared a basket with typical treats: peanut brittle, homemade peanut candy, and fried dough that filled the house with aromas that awakened the nostalgia of family traditions. As they prepared to leave, Richard received an unexpected call from Dr. Peterson. "Richard, I have news about Charlotte." "What happened?" She was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Philadelphia. Her behavior in prison improved drastically after the events of that night. Psychologists believe that she has finally been able to adequately process the guilt and regret. What does that mean for us? Legally, nothing changes. The renunciation of rights to hope is irrevocable. But she asked to send a letter to Isabel. Richard hesitated. A letter? I read the content. It's just a request for forgiveness and thanks, nothing disturbing or manipulative. I'll talk to Isabel and see if she wants to read it. When he mentioned the letter to his daughter, Isabel reflected for a moment with the maturity that always surprised the adults around her. Can I read it after the celebration? She said. Today, I just want to be happy with my family. The Harmony Creek 4th of July celebration was a spectacle of colors, sounds, and flavors that transformed the quiet town into a cauldron of joy. Food stalls were spread across the square, a country band animated couples dancing under the colored lights, and the smell of grilled corn and cider perfumed the night air. Isabel walked hand in hand with Richard, while Aparecida carried Hope, who watched everything with wide eyes of fascination. Clementine accompanied them, radiant to see her adoptive family enjoying themselves. "Daddy, look!" exclaimed Isabel, pointing to the central bonfire where children jumped over the embers following local tradition. "Can I jump too?" "When you get a little older," Richard replied. "For now, how about we dance?" The music changed to a square dance, and soon the whole family was holding hands, spinning in a circle with other families from the town. Hope laughed loudly, her dark hair flying in the wind as she tried to keep up with the steps of the older ones. It was during one of those dances that something magical happened. Mr. Johnson, the engineer neighbor who had become an adoptive grandfather to the girls, approached with a mysterious smile. "Richard, there's someone here who would like to meet your family." Behind him came a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes, accompanied by a tall man with glasses. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Marina Silva and her husband Roberto. They run an adoption center in Philadelphia." Richard immediately went on alert. "Is there a problem with our adoption papers?" "On the contrary," said Dr. Marina with a warm smile. We came here because your story reached us through social workers in the area. The way you built your family is inspiring." "I don't understand." Roberto spoke up. "We know your story through Charlotte's court case. Isabel's courage, your dedication as a father, the support network you built. It's exactly the kind of environment we dream of for children who need a home. What are you proposing?" "Nothing," said Dr. Marina quickly. "We didn't come here to propose anything. We came to personally meet the family that has been an example of how love can overcome any adversity." Isabel, curious, approached the visitors. "Do you take care of orphan children like I was?" "Yes, dear. We try to find loving families for children who need them." "And do you find many good families?" "Not always as many as we would like." Isabel thought for a moment, then looked at Richard with a serious expression. "Daddy, isn't our house too big for just 4 people?" The question caught everyone off guard. Richard knelt down to his daughter's level. "What do you mean, little one?" "Well, I was an orphan and you adopted me. Hope needed a family and we adopted her. Maybe other children need it too." "Isabel, adopting more children is a huge responsibility. But we have a lot of love to give, don't we?" Aparecida approached, listening to the conversation. "The girl is right, Richard. You transformed 2 lives that were lost. Maybe you could transform more." Dr. Marina watched the interaction with growing admiration. "Mr. Davenport, may I make a suggestion? How about you visit our center? Not as a commitment, but just to meet. See if you feel any connection." "I can think about it." Hope, who had been quiet in Aparecida's arms, suddenly stretched out her arms toward Dr. Marina, making her characteristic sound when she wanted attention. Looks like someone has already decided she likes you," Clementine laughed. As the night progressed, the family strolled through the celebration, participating in traditional games and savoring the local delicacies. Isabel won a goldfish in a ring toss game, which she immediately decided to name Goldie, demonstrating her inexhaustible creativity. During the fireworks that ended the celebration, everyone gathered in the center of the square. Hope slept in Richard's arms while the colored lights exploded in the sky, and Isabel watched in wonder, holding Aparecida's hand. "Daddy," she whispered during a break between the fireworks, "this was the best celebration of my life." "Why?" "Because for the first time I wasn't afraid of anything. I only felt love." On the way back home, Clementine carried the empty basket and the toys that the girls had won, while Richard drove carefully through the cobblestone streets of Harmony Creek. "Richard," said Aparecida, who had accepted the invitation to sleep at the mansion that night, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Have you ever imagined what your life would be like if you hadn't met Isabel that day in the square?" Richard thought for a moment. "I would probably be a rich and lonely man, obsessed with money and dividends, without understanding the true value of life. And now? Now I understand that the greatest wealth is not in financial investments or assets. It's in these two girls sleeping in the back seat, in having you as part of our family, in knowing that Clementine loves us as if we were her own children." "What about Dr. Marina's suggestion? I'll talk to Isabel tomorrow. If she really wants an even bigger family, well, maybe we should consider it." That night, after putting the girls to bed, Hope in the crib and Isabel in the bed next to it, always watching over her little sister, Richard sat in his favorite armchair in the living room, reflecting on the events of the night. Aparecida and Clementine talked softly in the kitchen, washing the last dishes and commenting on how much the girls had enjoyed themselves. The sound of their voices, mixed with the soft nighttime noises of Harmony Creek, created a symphony of domestic peace. He picked up the letter from Charlotte that Dr. Peterson had delivered and read it once more. It was truly a sincere request for forgiveness with no hidden intentions. She thanked Isabel for having taught her the true meaning of being human and wished that Hope would grow up surrounded by the same unconditional love that clearly exists in your family. When he went up to his room, he stopped at the door of the girls' room. Isabel was awake, looking out the window at the stars that shone over the town. "Can't sleep, little one." "I was thinking," she said, turning to him, "if we adopt more children, will they learn not to be afraid like I learned? If we give them a lot of love and care, yes. Then I think we should visit the place that the doctor talked about." "Are you sure?" "I am. Birds that have learned to sing should teach other birds too." That night, for the first time in almost 2 years, Richard fell asleep with plans for the future that involved not only his current family, but the possibility of extending it even further, multiplying the love that he had learned to cultivate thanks to a brave 4-year-old girl who one day had cut a rope and saved his life. 2 years after the 4th of July celebration that marked the beginning of a new phase, the Davenport mansion had completely transformed. What was once a silent and formal house now echoed with laughter, lively conversations, and the joyful noise of 5 children running through the halls. In addition to Isabel, now 7 years old, and Hope with 3, the family had grown with the arrival of Miguel, a 6-year-old boy who had lost his parents in an accident. Julia, a 4-year-old girl with hearing impairment who communicated through gestures and radiant smiles, and Pedro, an 8-month-old baby who had been abandoned in the hospital. "Daddy Richard!" shouted Miguel, running to the porch where Richard was working on his laptop. The company had fully recovered, now focusing on affordable housing projects that combined profit with social responsibility. "Isabel is teaching everyone how to draw in the garden." Richard looked out the window and saw a circle of children sitting on the grass, all concentrated on papers and colored pencils, while Isabel patiently explained how to draw birds flying. It was a scene that he never tired of watching. "And Pedro?" he asked. "He's sleeping in Grandma Clementine's lap. She said he only sleeps when she sings those old songs." Clementine had officially taken on the role of grandmother of the house, her position evolving naturally from maid to loving matriarch of a family that was constantly growing. Aparecida had also moved permanently into the mansion, occupying a room on the ground floor that Richard had renovated especially for her. "Mr. Davenport," said Clementine, appearing in the doorway with Pedro sleeping in her arms, "Dr. Peterson is here. He said he has important news." The lawyer arrived with a folder of documents and a smile that Richard had learned to recognize as bearing good news. "Richard, I have two pieces of news. First, Pedro's adoption process has been officially approved. He is legally your son now. And the second? Charlotte has requested one last visit. She will be released from rehabilitation next week and wants to say a proper goodbye before starting a new life in another state." The news caught Richard by surprise. "A visit here?" "Yes, but with all necessary precautions. Full supervision, limited duration. She specifically asked to see Hope and thank Isabel personally." Richard looked out the window, watching his 5 children playing together. The idea of exposing them again to Charlotte made him apprehensive, but there was something in the request that sounded genuine. "I'm going to talk to the children and see what they think." That night, during dinner at the large table that Richard had custom-made to accommodate the entire family, he presented the situation. The children listened attentively, each processing the information according to their age and experience. "Is Mrs. Davenport the mom that Hope was born from?" asked Julia, through the gestures that everyone had learned to communicate with her. "That's right," replied Isabel, translating for the younger ones. "But she did bad things before, and had to go to a special place to learn how to be good." Miguel, always practical, asked the obvious question. "And did she learn?" "I think so," said Isabel thoughtfully. "People can change when they really want to." Hope, now a talkative and clever child, surprised everyone with her maturity. "If she wants to see me, that's okay. But I want my whole family to be together." "Of course we will," assured Richard. The visit was scheduled for the following Saturday. Charlotte arrived accompanied by a social worker and Dr. Peterson, visibly nervous but determined. She had changed drastically. Her hair was natural, without dye. She wore simple clothes and her eyes reflected a serenity that had not existed before. The children waited for her in the living room, curious but protected by the presence of the entire adoptive family. Clementine held Pedro, Aparecida stood next to Julia, and Richard kept Isabel and Miguel close. "Hello, Hope," said Charlotte softly, kneeling at a respectful distance. "You've grown so much. You're so beautiful." Hope observed the woman who had given birth to her with the frankness typical of children. "Are you my mum, who I was born from?" "I am. But you have a better family now. Why didn't you want to take care of me before?" The direct question hit Charlotte like a blade, but she took a deep breath before answering honestly. "Because I was very sick in my heart. I did bad things and didn't know how to love properly. But now I've learned, and you're not going to do bad things anymore. Never again, I promise." Isabel approached, carrying a drawing that she had made especially for the occasion. It was an image of the complete family, all 5 children, Richard, Clementine, and Aparecida, with Charlotte drawn next to them, but separated by a low fence with an open gate. "This drawing is for you," said Isabel. "It shows that you can be part of our family, but from a distance, like an aunt who visits sometimes." Charlotte accepted the drawing with trembling hands, tears running down her face. "Thank you, Isabel, for teaching me what forgiveness is. And thank you for saving my life that night," replied the girl. "That showed that you had a good heart hidden inside." During the 2-hour visit, Charlotte met all the children, heard about their progress in school, saw the drawings they made, and above all witnessed the genuine harmony that existed in that unconventional family. "Richard," she said before leaving, "can I make one last request?" "What is it?" "If one day Hope wants to get to know me better when she's older, would you allow it?" If that's what she wants, yes. And if she never wants to, we'll respect that too. Charlotte nodded, understanding that she had found the peace she was looking for. You've built something beautiful here, something I could never have given her. After her departure, life resumed its joyful rhythm. The children returned to playing in the garden. Clementine prepared dinner, humming her old songs, and Aparecida helped with homework at the kitchen table. That night, while putting the children to bed, a task that now involved 5 rooms and many stories, Richard reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun almost 3 years earlier in the central square of Harmony Creek. "Daddy," said Isabel, already in her pajamas, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, little one." "Sometimes I dream about that day in the square when you were hanging from the tree, but in the dream it's not me who saves you. It's all of us, me, Miguel, Julia, Hope and Pedro, all together cutting the rope. It's a beautiful dream. It's because I understood something. You didn't save me that day, we saved each other. And we keep saving each other every day." The depth of the observation touched Richard deeply. At 7 years old, Isabel possessed a wisdom that many adults took a lifetime to achieve. "You're right, my daughter. Family is that. People who save each other." 6 months later, during another 4th of July celebration, the Davenport family was officially recognized by the Harmony Creek City Hall as Family of the Year for their community work and example of unconditional love. At the ceremony held in the same square where it had all begun, Richard took the stage with his 5 children, Clementine and Aparecida. The mayor presented the commemorative plaque to Isabel, recognizing her fundamental role in building that extraordinary family. "What would you like to say to the people of Harmony Creek?" asked the presenter. Isabel took the microphone with her 2 small hands and spoke with the clarity that characterized her. "I want to say that it doesn't matter where you were born or what happened to you before. If you find people who truly love you, you can be happy. And if you have love to give, there will always be space in your house for one more person." The applause was deafening. In the audience, Dr. Marina and Roberto watched with tears in their eyes, knowing that they had witnessed something rare, a family that had transformed pain into love and multiplied that love infinitely. That night, while the fireworks illuminated the sky of Harmony Creek, the Davenport family gathered in the garden of their home. The 5 children ran among the trees with colored lanterns. Clementine and Aparecida talked about plans to further expand the house, and Richard watched everything with a heart overflowing with gratitude. His financial wealth was now modest compared to what he had before, but his true riches were immense. He had 5 children who loved him unconditionally, 2 extraordinary women who cared for the family with maternal dedication, and a community that supported them. "Daddy Richard," shouted Pedro, now walking steadily at 2 years old, running to him with open arms. "What is it, my champion?" "Love you lots." "I love you too, son. I love all of you." While he hugged Pedro and watched his other children playing under the stars of Pennsylvania, Richard understood that he had found the true meaning of life. It wasn't in stock dividends or investment profits, but in the genuine smiles, the tight hugs, the words of love whispered before going to sleep. The 4-year-old girl who one day had cut a rope to save him had in fact cut all the ropes that bound him to an empty existence. And together they had built something more valuable than any fortune. A family based on true love, where each member was chosen consciously and loved unconditionally. That night, for the first time in his life, Richard Davenport fell asleep knowing that he was truly rich, not in money, but in love. And that was the kind of wealth that no financial crisis could take away, no betrayal could destroy, and no time could diminish. The echo of the happy voices of his children mixed with the sound of the bells of the Harmony Creek Church, creating a symphony of happiness that spread throughout the town like a blessing. And somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, Richard smiled, knowing that his story had found the most perfect ending possible. A new beginning, full of love, with each dawning day. Please comment, giving a score from 0 to 10 for my story. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help.